Welcome to Cybersynapse, the podcast that's creating connections through candid conversations about cyber issues. Sponsored by Agency, with your host, Kath Nibbs. Welcome to Cybersynapse. This week, you're joined by me. Unfortunately, the podcast guest this week had a family emergency, so I was going to leave it that I didn't actually record anything. And then yesterday, I had the utter privilege. I'm still reeling from this. I went down to London and I spent some time in the company and presence of somebody called Jim Kwik. So for those of you who have been paying attention in the podcasts, I've talked about Jim Kwik in terms of passwords and how we can remember stuff. And also I got to go down and have a picture taken with him in my Brain t-shirt, which is on my social media profiles. I was absolutely stoked to take. I mean, I got bought this present a couple of years ago. And it was just so fun to actually be able to just stick a t-shirt in my bag and go down and wear it, and to have a photograph with Jim Kwik. So I'm not a person who does selfies in terms of with many of the people that I've had the privilege to meet at lots and lots of conferences, particularly at so I did about 9 days last year at a biodynamic conference, which I met lots and lots of people. So I've talked about heart math on some of my podcasts, and I got to meet Rolly McCarthy, who was the person who developed that. I've had time with Gabor Mate, with Stephen Porges, and obviously I talk about the polyvagal theory quite a lot, and it's his theory. I've spent time with Bessel van der Kolk, one of my other heroes, Louis Cosolino, and I could go on and on and on. But yesterday was something that I thought, actually, I'm going to do something different today. So as I've come back up today, as I've come back up from London and through to Manchester and back today, I've been doing a little bit of musing, and I was really, really struck by Jim Kwik. Not yesterday. It was actually something that happened yesterday that made me, that was a therapy thing to say, wasn't it? That made me, I actually recognised one of the reasons I'm struck by Jim Kwik's story so viscerally is because he's talking about something that happened to him as a child. So not only is he talking about the fact that he had an accident and had a brain injury, which is trauma in itself, and obviously I do work with trauma, and that is my my specialist subject. It was what was said to him. So what I want to try and do is just do a little bit about why I do this podcast, but do it from a positivity frame of reference, rather than the doom and gloom, which sometimes it can sometimes feel like that I'm doing that on this podcast. So what I wanted to do was kind of say, this is why I'm a therapist, and why I do what I do, but also why I'm doing Cybersynapse. So right at the end of Jim Kwik's speech yesterday, he was talking about we grow old because we forget how to play and we don't play. And that's actually what I do as a job. I get to play day in, day out, and that's part and parcel of my therapy practice, but it's also something that I do personally. So I have a really kind of positive outlook on life, and I absolutely enjoy going into something that's called my child ego state in one of the teachings of transactional analysis. And I thought, actually, one of the things that I thought I might do is just talk to you a little bit about how children get themselves into what Jim Kwik calls limiting beliefs, and how I get to do the fantastic work that I do with children. And by fantastic work that I do, I don't mean that from a narcissistic perspective. So yeah, I work in this realm, this paradigm of trauma, and obviously my book is Cyber Trauma. I work with trauma, and I call it corporeal and virtual and how they overlap. So that's in real life and virtual. And I pretty much do not live in the Disney world in terms of I recognise what can and does happen to people, so to children and then to adults, or to children who then become those adults who get stuck with some of these messages. So sometimes when I'm doing Cybersynapse, I forget. Yeah, I suspect I forget that because I live in this world, that I can talk about it with at one step removed. And whilst being in the therapy room with the clients, I'm never one step removed. I'm always one step in their trauma with them, but always one step in my own ego state. That there's something about this podcast probably feels a little bit negative in terms of the conversations that I do have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how I do the other side of it, why I do what I do, and to heal it. So my job is playing and recovery with children. And those children can be the child that's in the adult. It can also be the child that's actually physically in the room. And I'm going to talk about what Jim Kwik talked about yesterday was the limiting beliefs. So he was given this limiting belief by another adult who said that he was the boy with the broken brain. And that became his narrative. That became something that he told himself was his limit. So I can't do this because. And that's pretty much what I hear week upon week upon week from some of these children. So I'm going to talk that I work with 3 and 4 year olds. I'm aware that the podcast is international. So rather than trying to do grades and school years, which confuses me as it is, I just thought to talk about ages. So I've been working with maybe 3 and 4 year olds, and they've attempted to do something in the room, and they've said, well, I can't do that, Kath. I'm rubbish at that, Kath. For example, colouring in or something. I can't do that, Kath. I'm rubbish at that. And I will ask, where have you heard this? Who's told you this? Where does this information come from? Very often it's parents or teachers. So what I mean by that is sometimes as parents, we're not perfect. No, not sometimes. Most of the time as parents, we're not perfect, myself included. And we make statements to our children without recognising the impact that it has. In transactional analysis, these are called injunctions. So they are messages that we are given that we almost swallow whole, and they become who we are. Now, the thing about these injunctions is they don't have to be verbal. They can be the tut, the look, the one that says, or where, for example, I was actually working with a child once who was trying to wrap a present, and he was finding it really, really difficult. He was about 8 or 9, and with his hands, technically could have been able to wrap this present. But what was happening was he was getting frustrated. And through the therapy process, we were talking about why this was so difficult to do. And he said, well, when I can't fold it properly, so these are his words, when I can't fold it properly, Mummy snatches it and does it herself. So there wasn't a single word spoken to this child. He couldn't do it properly. Mum would literally take the parcel and would wrap it. And he almost interpreted, I'm no good. I can't do it properly. Mum does it properly. I can't. And one of the things that children tend to do is they then foresee how they then see themselves in the world on this continuum that we might call life positions or frame of reference or script. So there's lots of ways to describe it. And I quite like a piece of theory that talks about the OK corral. And this is what we call I'm OK, you're OK. Or the other positions are I'm OK, you're not OK. Or I'm not OK, you're OK. And the last one is I'm not OK and you're not OK. And actually, I was listening yesterday to conversations that were happening, and I was watching people's behaviour while Jim Kwik was talking, and I thought this is really fascinating. These limiting beliefs are part and parcel of who we are as adults until we address or we become aware of what those limiting beliefs actually are. So the very first step in addressing these limiting beliefs is you have to become aware of what they are. So there's something around what do you say to yourself most often? What do other people say to you? I'm just thinking of a psychology theory here that talks about the looking glass. So I think it's the looking glass theory, where other people will reflect back to you what you're like. It generally happens in school playgrounds. But then we also get the phrases that people use with us, and it's our inner talk. And this is our inner critical it's almost like a team. So when I'm talking to children in therapy, I quite often talk about, well, we have people that are there to help us, and they're very nice, welcoming, they always say positive things, they try to nurture, they try to take care. And then we have this other team, and this other team are the ones who tease us, who tell us we're no good at things, that tell us we're rubbish. And it's this particular aspect that I've noticed is the one that can be very, very quick to be integrated into a child's narrative about who they are in the world. So, for example, I'm working with an adult, and we were discussing their schoolwork, actually. So one of the things that we sometimes do in therapy is we go back and we actually bring in stuff that we've done in the past. And this adult brought in I think it might have been, they were 9 or 10. So the thing that they were doing on a week, and the teacher had written, there is absolutely no point. It's like pulling teeth trying to work with. And I looked at this piece of paper, and me and the client had a conversation, and I said, what was that like? And the client said, I never wrote a thing for that teacher after that. And this is one of the things that I wanted to say is, actually, when we do discount, dismiss, and we make our comments to children, sometimes done in and with the best of intentions to boost them, to get them to do a piece of homework, and this is where I'm going in a minute, to get them to come off devices, and we give them the other D word, the diagnosis, whether it's psychopathological, the parent diagnosis, or the actual mental health diagnosis, that actually what we do is we create that limiting belief for a child. And this is really, really difficult for children. And then what happens is they grow up with this particular belief. And the thing about beliefs is they then drive what you do, how you behave, where you think you're going. And I'm just drawn to a phrase of, whilst I think, so I've just put my hands over my face while I'm just doing my thinking moment. It is, you cannot talk yourself out of problems you behaved yourself into, right? So when clients are coming in and they're talking about some of what they've done, and they're actually talking about what they've done, actually I'm hearing about the beliefs that they've got. So this is sometimes why I get to do what I do. And what is that? Well, I play. So I really kind of get in touch with the other team within this child or within this adult. And what we do is we talk about what's fun, where the fun went. Because actually, when you have limiting beliefs, or when you have injunctions, or when you have almost what we call self-fulfilling prophecies, that you become that thing that you've been told that you are, or you aren't, and that you can't, and you don't, and you won't, and all the other kind of critical words that we use, what does happen is play gets left by the wayside. So more often than not, the children who are traumatized, the adults who have had a really tough critical background, do not play. And if I was to talk about how they present, they're very, very adult, they're very sensible, they don't have this joyous part to their personality, because it almost got stamped out. Brene Brown talks about this, that the moment of shame that we all have mostly have in our childhood, tends to be from a place of where we were told we couldn't do something, and basically when we were acting silly or stupid. But it's not silly or stupid, it's play. And play is how we learn. So obviously this is why I was spurred on by what Jim Kwik was saying yesterday, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I do as a job. So sometimes when I'm obviously doing the podcast, I forget that some of my listeners and the viewers, you may not have this possibly awareness, you may not have this permission to be as daft as I am, or as playful as I am. So this is about what can we do as a podcast so that I can bring in more learning to you about these cyber topics. How can I make them fun? How can we have a play about with them? I think I tend to do this with Gary when I talk to him, because we do play at silly, at being silly around the topics, because we know they're so distressing at times. And quite often we will have that conversation before we record a podcast. And this is what I wanted to say. Some of these subjects will come across as though they're being very sensible, or perhaps that you might think that I'm having a little bit too much of a joyous time and getting very giggly about some of the subjects. And that's because I give myself permission to know myself and to be able to do that. So back to play. So again, I tend to do this as well, don't I? I go off on a tangent and I come back. So what was I going to try and say earlier? Oh, it was playing on digital devices, digital media. One of the injunctions that's coming through into my therapy room at the moment is the addiction injunction, but also this, you're useless, you can't play on that because X, Y, Z. So when parents are punitive with their children about their devices, and they separate them from their devices or separate them from their games, so I'm just thinking about computer games here, that also causes this level of injunctions. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because there's something about, if we can't do something, what effect does that have on us? If we can't play, so if we are the last child to be picked for some form of sports at school, so there's the people who are adept, good, competent, we have lots of different words, but basically children will say in my therapy room, they're the good kids, they're the popular kids, they're the ones who can. I'm the one who can't, and the reason I can't is because I'm rubbish. There is something about some children are using the internet and space, and I've talked about this in my book, that this is what some children are good at, this is what they can play at, and this is one of their versions of play. So we have structured play, we have, so in my building here I have imaginative play, I have a rocking chair that I use as a spaceship, it's been used as a boat, it's been used as a place to run around in terms of one of the games that we were playing, it's been used as almost a netball net, because that's what we can do. Anything can be anything in this building. And I have structured play, so I have the sand tray, which is where I can work through dream work, I can work through trauma. And I was just thinking about, what is it that stops people playing? And I think it's the I will be rejected moment. So the idea of I can't do that, and it becomes either an excuse, a reason, or something that prevents us from joining in on something. So for example, I might go to one of the conferences, and it might be an evening where there's some music and I will get up to dance, and there will be people who won't get up to dance. And I'm sometimes curious, is that because they were mocked, teased, ridiculed, humiliated? Is it something they think they can't do? What do they tell themselves about this, I can't dance, or I can't get up and enjoy myself? And this was where I was thinking about, okay, so when we limit children's ability to use all of their brain, we actually limit who they are. So over the last week, I've actually been teaching a couple of children and some adults about the brain. So I do it slightly differently to Jim Kwik and a few other people. I've taken a little bit of Dan Siegel's work. I've taken Yeah, I've taken pretty much the neuroscience from the psychotherapy perspective, and what I do is I teach about the brain, and I've actually applied this to the cyberspace. So I think recently I did an article for Ditto, and if you don't know what Ditto is, you can go to Alan Mackenzie's website, who I've spoken to before on here, and he does a quarterly email that goes out to schools, to parents, and I talked about risk, why adolescents take particular risks, and I talked about it in pretty much in terms of how the brain works. So when I'm teaching children, I teach them that the brain is like a house, and we talk about all the things that you would need in a house to make it work, and why it wouldn't work if all of the pieces weren't communicating with each other. For example, if only the light turned on upstairs when I switched to switch downstairs, then that wouldn't quite work as you expected it to. It didn't mean that the lighting system was broken. It meant that it was not working in the way that you expected. And we talk about that actually all of the lights work. You just need to know which switch it is to make them turn on, and how you get the heating on. There is no point in having heating on in one room because the rest of the house is cold. So what I'm trying to do is really explain to young children about something that's called differentiation. So this is about how the brain works and how the brain parts work together. And you can make it really, really simple. So I think I've done I know I've done some articles. I think they've gone to, I'm not sure if it was in Pro software, but anyway, you'll be able to find off my website, because I am starting to put things in a bit more of a coherent manner for the new site when it goes live. But the thing that isn't happening for a lot of children in terms of the internet, in terms of play, and in terms of what they are allowed to do, to think, to expand their knowledge, is critical thinking. So this is one of my favourite subjects to talk about, because when we give children limiting beliefs, or we tell them what to think, they don't learn how to think. So there is another element of we leave children with a deficit, and then we wonder why we don't play when we grow up, when we age, when we mature, because the thing that keeps us human, joyous, connected is this life force. It's joy, it's happiness, it's play. And I get to do this as a job. So where I do bring quite a lot of doom and gloom in terms of the subject matters that I talk about in Cybersynapse, my job is to sit with the children who have been cyberbullied or groomed online or had a corporeal abuse. There is something about, this is what I get to do, and I get to run around this building quite often dressed up with glitter, with items, and it's all about imagination and play. The children get to think what they need to think, but also how to think. So I talk to them about, well, why, who said that? Is it the truth? What would that mean if it wasn't true? How could you improve yourself? And then I thought, oh my God, this is what I've been doing for the last probably 8 years actually, in terms of, whilst I did training, I had to be in my own psychotherapy. I've done all sorts of courses. This is one of the reasons why I went down to Jim Kwik yesterday. So I've done some of Jim Kwik's courses. I've done some of the Mind Valley stuff. I've listened to Tim Ferriss, Tom Bilyeu, the Human Experience podcast, Rob Reed's podcast. And I just thought, actually, this is the other thing that happens. When I'm doing the podcast, one of the things is I'm bringing in some of this information, and I wondered how helpful it would be for me to put resources in the show notes. And that's the reason I started the Patreon page, is because if I'm going to go racking through all of my paperwork, it will take me some time. But there is something about, I can put the resources into Patreon. So for those of you that are interested, you can go over, and as a subscriber, you can get hold of this information, because it's all about self-growth. And as an adult, I've been doing this for some time. So, for example, yesterday was London. This morning was Manchester for my supervision. I've got a self-care strategy weekend that I'm on this weekend. I've got my, so I do flotation tanks. I go and see a bodywork therapist. I have a massage. I really take care of myself, because that's the way that I'm able to be here doing the podcast, but also to be here for my clients. And I thought, actually, there's this saturated market at the moment of get yourself better, self-help, self-promotion. And you know what? Some of it is absolute shit in terms of wasting your money and time. And I think one of the things that's been really, really helpful for me is it's taken me a long time to work out how to think about the things that I need to pay attention to. And what's important for me is my why. I ask everybody this question on the podcast each week. Why do you do what you do? Well, I do what I do because I have some knowledge to share. And if I keep that knowledge to myself, that's really selfish. So as I go on and do my research at PhD, and I go on and I do, so writing the second book is about passing that information on. There is something about, I don't want my work to be hidden behind a paywall that people can't get hold of. I take from a lot of other people. So yesterday, just by being around a hugely positive peer group, and it was really, really fantastic. One of the nicest days I've had around people. I've actually taken some energy from that, and I thought, okay, what do I do with this? So as I was sat in the car and I was listening to something else, I thought, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the podcast myself today, and I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to talk about why I do what I do, which is because I'm passionate about the knowledge that I have about why we do what we do on the internet, why we do what we do on consoles, on devices, how that's having an impact, and then how I can help you help the children, how I can help you help the adolescents, because that's the remit of this podcast. Yes, I get to talk to lots and lots of fantastic people and other academics and people who are also passionate about their interests. But I could sit talking to these people via email. I could sit talking to them on Zoom and keeping it all to myself. And then I thought, no. So I think it's coming up to, it will be nearly a year, August, September time. Yeah. And I thought, actually, this is what I want to keep doing while I'm doing my podcast. But I'm doing my PhD, but I may not be able to go at the same speed. I've recognised that I do put a lot of time and effort into this. And rather than saying to people, begging for time and for money, actually, there's something here about this knowledge is what I'm trying to share. And I think that it's important that I do share it with you, because I think that gives you a whole set of tools, similar to the cocktail party kind of where you have the champagne glasses. If I pass that information to another level, you can then become adept at helping the children who are around you. And this is a way that we can actually help children. So Jim Kwik does what he's doing, which is teaching children how to learn. And I think it should be in all schools. And it's an amazing job that he's doing. And I was just absolutely blown away by it yesterday in terms of that's what matters. That's what matters in terms of passion and putting it out there. And obviously I'm putting this out to the universe, and it's going there. So there's a lot I want to achieve in terms of helping children. And the only way I can do that is by putting the podcast out there and some resources. But there also has to be, I don't know, help me with my stone soup is what I'm saying. I can try and make this soup, but actually I need the help of the village. I need other people to be part of a community. And essentially that's what I'm saying today's episode's about is, let's see if we can spread the word about this podcast. Let's see if we can make it much, much more enjoyable in terms of bringing, at times really macabre topics to you, because there are some to come, people that I've got to speak to. But also, let's make this about helping children, because at the moment there's a lot of diagnoses flying around and lots and lots of attributable, what do I want to call it? There's a lot of panic, but also a lot of disdain for the younger people. And they're our next generation. And to sit with the children I do, the reason there might be a lot of disdain for them is because they're sitting with these beliefs about themselves, which we as the older generation are actually causing. So this is about, maybe our community needs to be looking at younger people in a different way and treating them as children, not dinosaur bones and jars with labels on. And I will keep banging on about that, because I think that actually if we could talk about what children are coping with today. So I'll just give you a little insight into my my book and my thinking. Children are coping with two worlds where you or I, i.e. anybody over the age of 25, only ever had to manage one world. And whether these worlds are virtual and corporeal, actually there's a distinction about, even if you're in the corporeal, the virtual one is one you're always having to manage in your mind. This is what I'm talking about. This is why children need to be allowed to be completely in charge of their own mind, so that they can then manage what it is that they need to think about. And if we put limits on it, we actually create a very, very stifled space for thinking, feeling and doing. I don't know, I think that's probably the end of where I'm going to go to today. Yeah, if you've got any kind of comments, please do let me know. As I said, this is about a community, and I'm going to start making a couple of pages on Patreon where you can do resources. I've been looking into how to do it today, Googling around it on the way back on the train this morning. And yeah, I think there's something here about, if I can share as much of this as possible, then I will do, because I can't get it all into my book. I can't get it all into the podcasts. And during the week, I get a limited amount of children that I can help. So I'm asking for your help so that I can recruit you to help me to help the world. I think that'll do for this week. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for actually spending the time getting to the end of these. I do know that I do talk, and that's part of who I am, and I'm quite proud to be able to say that my thinking goes off on a tangent quite sometimes, but I do tend to keep track of it, and I quite like that faculty. Yeah, in terms of Patreon, it's for those that are listening, it's www.patreon.com/cybersynapse, and it wasn't www. Don't know what I'm on about. Right. In terms of my website, it's going through an update at the moment, and that'll be out. There will also be resources and courses on that later on in the year. And obviously, follow me on social media. I keep Facebook for mostly friends, but Twitter and Instagram are where I tend to talk with people and put other posts out. And I also have a Facebook Live every Tuesday, 8 p.m. GMT, on my page, Cyber, Trauma and Young People. So sign up over there. Please rate this podcast. Obviously, feedback is feedback. If you think it's worth one, put a 1. If you think it's a 5 and you think it deserves other people to find it, please give it a rating of 5. All you have to do is scroll down to the bottom of iTunes. There's a 5-star, well, there's 5 stars. It's easier than eBay. Just click on the stars that you think it should be rated. The more of those that happen, the more it will be shared around. And in terms of Jim Kwik's thinking, yeah, let's change these limiting beliefs. And his phrase is, if you fight for them, you get to keep them. I'm saying, let's not dish them out in the first place where possible. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.